Hello, everyone. Welcome to another preview of AEW Dynamite. I'm your host, Tyler Sage at Ring of Tyler, where my font has looked to have changed a little bit, so I'll have to investigate that. But thank you for joining me as always, whether it be live, whether it be on delay, whether you want to watch Dynamite and then laugh at all my predictions that inevitably will be wrong to slightly off, right? So appreciate you all joining me here today. As always, it's February 1st, 2023, and we are talking about AEW Dynamite specifically today, the one taking place in Dayton, Ohio at the Nutter Center, my favorite arena name in the country, home to, it's one of those towns, a secondary town, I would say, that has a lot of wrestling history. There's lots that come to mind, but a lot of those ECW pay-per-views that were outside of Philadelphia early on were in Dayton, and I'm not from Dayton per se. I am wearing my Ohio State shirt today to rep Dayton a little bit here, but I will not be at the show. But a good secondary town for wrestling, and the crowd there will be good. I have seen SmackDowns and Raws in the past at Dayton, and I think the crowd can be a little hit or miss. So I'm very curious to see how the live crowd is tonight, especially with such a stacked lineup that they have. So we'll go over each match individually here. But again, thank you for joining, either live or delayed. Please make sure you like the video, subscribe, hit the bell notification. All that stuff helps the channel tremendously. And, I couldn't be here. Zach couldn't be here. Other members of the Torch couldn't be here without your support. And we're looking to expand some content. So all of those things, the liking, the subscribing, the bell notification, the comments, all that sort of stuff helps tremendously to keep this channel going in the right direction. And that's only because of you guys. So again, thank you as always. And I'll thank you again at the end because I love to thank you guys. So we'll run down the card here and talk about each match. Well, I'll list the matches and I'll talk about it individually as people pop in the chair and get their opinions in. But what I think will be the main event, we've got Darby Allin taking on Samoa Joe for the TNT title. A co-main event, a match more important in my opinion, is Jon Moxley taking on Hangman Page in their rubber match, which I thought would be a pay-per-view level match, and it still could be, so we'll talk about that. We got Bryan Danielson taking on Timothy Thatcher in his final qualification match, if you will, to face MJF for an hour at the pay-per-view. We've got Takeshita taking on Brian Cage, as that was kind of established last week that why this would be happening. So kind of a classic AEW angle to set up a match the next week. Then we've got Jade Cargill taking on Red Velvet. The story was told for a while and kind of went away, and now we're paying that off. So if anyone in the comments knows Jade's current win-loss record, I think she was at 46-0 when Red Velvet walked out on her. And I don't know if she's had a match since, maybe a tag match, but this gets her to 47 or 48-0 off the top of my head. So could be mistaken there, but let me know kind of where you guys are if I am correct in that. And we'll talk about that much as well. And we also have the Acclaimed in Action is being announced. And also news broke that Kenny Omega's visa issues have subsided and that he will be in Dayton for Dynamite. So you can presume to see Elite as a unit there. And as we are, the 4 or 5, I have to look at a calendar, but I assume we're 4 weeks of TV away from the pay-per-view. So a lot of the stuff happening tonight, the Mox Hangman stuff, the Danielson Thatcher stuff, and then if the Elite do show up, I think you're going to start setting up those pay-per-view matches. And this is usually the week where that starts. And then next week, and the week after, you'll get, if there's 12, 15 matches, you'll get 3 or 4 announced through Dynamite and through Rampage. Has been the cadence for Tony Khan to book his pay-per-view. So that'll be exciting to look forward to. So let's get into all these individually, and then, comment below if you have any sort of, anything on tonight's show. You guys are always good at topic and giving me better ideas than those I have initially. And then at the very end, talk about if AEW were to have a Royal Rumble, as the Rumble has dominated last week and this week on the topic of conversation. Obviously, this time last year, Kenny Omega, Freudian slip. Cody Rhodes was part of AEW, and he went on to win the Rumble this past year. So, if AEW were to have a Royal Rumble, currently in the way they're booking, if it was the same thing, right? The winner of the AEW Royal Rumble is totally lifted off of WWE, they would get a title shot at Double or Nothing, right? So who would that be in your opinion? We'll get into some of my thoughts, but I'm very curious who you guys would book if you were in Tony Khan's seat for that decision, if that were true. Fun little booking game to play. So let's get right into it. I want to start with what I think is the most important match on the show tonight. It's Jon Moxley taking on Adam Page in a rubber match between the two gentlemen. I think the build to this has been obviously stop and start. You had the concussion for Hangman back in October, and then you had their match at the Kia Forum about 3 weeks ago. And then Moxley's been off TV to sell the beatdown that Page gave him, and the story's been told through Hangman and Renee's time together, on-screen time together, I should say. And, that's all been fine for this, I think. But I think a lot of people had an issue with the Hangman character being a little up and down, of being, for too long, in their opinion, kind of whiny about getting knocked out. And, the week before the Kia Forum match, he established, I think, what the character more needed, and like a lack of respect. And I think that continues tonight in some way, shape, or form. That it was a pivot made by either Moxley or Page or someone else, probably Moxley if I had to guess, or an agent, to kind of recenter the Page character. And if he's going to get a win over Moxley, it's got to be worth it, and it's got to project Adam Page as a guy who could maybe take on an MJF, right, as a babyface at the next pay-per-view or the next big branded show as a former champion, feel like a viable competitor and not just a foregone conclusion, like a little bit like the Danielson match is going to feel like in the end. So all of that being said, I like the build more than most on this. Hazan, hello. How are you? Good. Thank you for joining. I'll pop you up here for all history to know you were here on the show. But I've liked the build more than most. I don't think it's been a 10 out of 10 by any stretch of the imagination. It's not a bloodline Sami Zayn style story in the long-term view of it. But I think in the end, with Moxley's character's help, I think it'll help this, what I think is going to be a win for Hangman tonight, or something that gets to a potential win at the next pay-per-view. Reestablishes the Hangman character, what is important to him, what makes him special. I don't think he's going to be drinking beer out of someone in the crowd, but it's reestablishing who he is and what he's there for. And I think that's a better option than him just reuniting with the Elite and kind of being the fourth wheel on that operation. They can work together, they can be friends, but he can treat them like the Dark Order, where he's occasionally hanging around them, but he's doing his own thing more often than not. And I think beating Moxley here in this match, or if something happens tonight and it's a double count out, this feels like an opportunity to be the most, well, there you go. Because great minds think alike. A double DQ, both guys are counted out on the outside at the same time, so that leads to a last man standing match. Like, that feels very much on the table, which AEW does not pull the trigger on ever. It would seem to have like a schmoz finish. So I think that happening tonight and then having the rubber match happen at Revolution feels good to me as a fan. I'm curious if anyone else would push back on that, but AEW does it so infrequently that this is why the canvas of pro wrestling gives you this option. If you don't abuse it, it works tremendously well. And I think that's why this is not the main event. That's why Darby and Joe will be the main event for some tomfoolery, if you will, in this situation. And I think that works just fine. They can both, Moxley wins, Page wins, both be even here, and then the true rubber match still happens at Revolution, is what I think happens. But we'll see. I think, again, it's all in the it's in the what's finishing here, right? Like, what's your goal if you're Tony Khan? Is it to maintain Jon Moxley as a guy who is pretty much unbeatable, and unless you're I mean, his only singles losses to Hangman and MJF, right? So, and CM Punk. So that's important still. You don't want to abuse that, kind of like where Jericho's currently at, where he's like a lesser version of that. But, is that what your goal is, or is your goal to make Adam Page again a top 3 babyface, top 2 babyface, if you will, and be the next guy in line to face MJF, where, it's kind of the upping of the ante of who can beat MJF, right? Like Bryan Danielson does not feel like he has any chance to beat MJF at this time. The person who faces him at Double or Nothing probably doesn't have a good chance because the run won't feel as long for a Tony Khan champion. But, if you have an Adam Page there who's built up and feels like a more viable competitor, they're the 2 young guys that you could pick at the very first AEW pay-per-view that they, if you were in May of 2019 watching AEW and you're like, man, what I bet in March 2023, 4 years from now, I should say, if you have MJF and Adam Page going for the title, it'll have felt like a positive growth for the company where you have 2 guys who aren't WWE guys facing off for the title in the biggest stage that the company has. That to me makes a lot of sense. So having Page go over in the end here sets you up for that as a potential. So, no reporting here, just makes a lot of sense to me in the way Tony Khan books. So that's what I think happens. If you missed it, Hassan had a similar idea, but I think we get some sort of double DQ, a double count out, something that is a tie. We're not going to do an hour here, or, if they still do 20-minute time limits for matches, that could be a possibility as well. But that's a great opener either way to do that sort of thing. So that's where I'm going. No winner. And we get to the true rubber match at the Revolution pay-per-view. So there we go. Next, let's talk about Bryan Danielson taking on Timothy Thatcher. Should be a very fun match. I think it'll be placed in a similar spot that the Danielson matches have been, that 8:30, 8:45 Eastern time spot. Thatcher coming out. I liked how they presented him last week. I think they'll do more of that tonight to establish his, the killer shooting style that he has. Should be an awesome, 12-minute match that Danielson ends up coming through as the underdog babyface, gets a good win. It's really more about what MJF does after, does he attack? Does he do the same sort of thing? I think his character's been good recently, but of switching it up, not doing the same thing over and over again. So, in past MJF Herculean gauntlets that his opponents have had to do to get to him, he would have Wardlow or FDR or another Stokely in his group come out and attack his opponent and injure them. So MJF doesn't have that currently going on. So does he do him and Thatcher team up and Cage and Takeshita comes out? Whatever. There's things there. I just hope it's not that. I hope it's a win for Danielson, and then we get more of that MJF character that we saw in his sit-down promo where he talked about how the belt means everything to him, how, it was basically the insecure heel character that he's doing now. And more of that, him on the stage, Danielson in the ring, Danielson not even responding, just MJF cutting a promo and walking out. That's in the segment is how I would book it. I'd like to see it laid out in front of me to give you how I would truly book it if I was Tony Khan, but something like that is what I think is in order tonight. And then you can tell that story for the 3 weeks after this, but Danielson wins. It's established that match is happening. Then what's the story of the next couple of weeks, right? Is that, Danielson's not on TV to get a week off, and then we really push it hard, the penultimate episode of Dynamite before the show. So lots to do here. But yeah, should be, as Zach said. And Tracy, hello, how are you? You were doing good, it would look like. So yeah, as Zach says here, should be very, very good. Yeah, I mean, looking at the card, I think Moxley Hangman is more story than in-ring action. I think Darby and Samoa Joe is similar as well. So this should, match the night. If it's not, then something terrible has happened. So I think you can book that of the week. It's interesting. When does the week start for you, Zach? From a in-ring standpoint of just, the match, I mean, I certainly would agree. I don't think it would touch anything that having at the Rumble, right? I think it would be better than anything from a in-ring standpoint. Be much better than anything that was at the Rumble. So I think we agree. So there we go. So I've got Bryan Danielson winning. Surprise, surprise. Okay, let me mark off my list what we've talked about here. But okay, let's talk about Takeshita versus Brian Cage. Again, Brian Cage being used again this week as his contract status is kind of coming up here. I think April was the last thing I saw reported. I'm trying to remember when he came. I think he came in at Double or Nothing, right, a couple years ago. So, but again, someone please correct me. I'm not up on my Brian Cage lineage in AEW as much as I should. But yeah, I mean, he's being used, and curious to see what happens there. I still think Triple H in WWE would love to have a guy like Brian Cage. So it's interesting if you're not going to re-sign him and you're utilizing him to kind of, it's the opposite of the Vince McMahon effect. If that is the case, right? He's losing, but he's on TV, and having TV time in AEW, having awesome matches is so much better than being like the Revival, right, at the end when they were leaving WWE and being huge jokes and kind of butting around with Randy Orton, etc. So we'll see, but it would seem odd to me for Tony Khan to use him so much if he's not going to resign. But if it's actually April, we might not see him, after tonight, then that makes more sense. So interesting there. But yeah, Takeshita needs a big win, as Zach said, and it feels like the right spot for him. A guy like Cage is built for that. This is obviously the Danielson and Cage match last week was tremendous. Brian Cage's best match, I think it was last week, right? Or do I have my weeks messed up? But anyway, is Takeshi going to get the best match that Brian Cage has ever had out of him? Probably not. But if it's even 60% of that, I think it will establish what a lot of people think and are projecting on Takeshita as being a big star. And I think that would be a positive sign for, AEW 2 years from now, if he can get a, 2/3 as good of a match out of Brian Cage as Bryan Danielson did. So that's really what I'm looking for. I think Takeshita wins almost no matter what. And then, yeah, it was great. I mean, I think you're looking at my my outline of the show here, but Takeshita in the Elite, like what happened with that? Well, Kenny had his visa issues. It's being reported that Kenny is in Dayton, will be part of the show. So this seems like a good spot for the Elite to come out and, embrace Takeshita. What does that mean? Because you got to set up, you don't set up this week, but you probably got to set up by next week who the Elite are taking on. And it certainly seems like it's not House of Black, because they seem to be very focused with Eddie Kingston and company. So who is that? Is that someone? Is that Cage and Khan and I forget the other guy's name in that group? Like, that doesn't seem good to me, but something like that's going to happen, and the Elite and Takeshita coming together here. You could also have Hangman join with them, and you have more of an Elite group. But yeah, I think there's something to look out for what is happening in the post match here. Thank you, Zach Toa Leona. I apologize to that gentleman, but if you're on TV as much as they are, then you can't blame me for not knowing that off the top of my head. But Zach, thank you. So yeah, I think it should be a good match. Again, the quality of the match, if it's a whatever you want to put your rating on it, but that's what I'm looking for tonight. It should be fantastic. Then we've got Red Velvet taking on Jade Cargill. As I said at the top of the show, this story has been kind of up and down from how long it's taken, and the beats of it feel 3 weeks apart every time they tell a story here. So not a huge fan of that, but this has always been kind of an intermediate story to tell with Jade on her way to 50 wins. As I said, if anyone knows her total win count once she wins tonight, as my prediction is, I think she's 48 now after she wins tonight. But Red Velvet was a baddie. She left the group. She left Jade during a tag match that they had together. Jade still won, but that's been all this. That's been the impetus to set this up. So I think a solid match tonight. It's got the intrigue of Jade's record now is a big deal. So that's an interesting angle to take here. Okay, she'll be 50 per Zach. So have him be your guiding light here, everybody. But yeah, so get her 50th win, and then really it feels like we're at a point where that title is her losing is more on the table than ever when she gets that 50th win, I think. So I'm super intrigued to see what story they tell there. It's one of the longest term story they've told in the company, essentially. So will it be any sort of a good payoff, or will it be like a random win for a Chris Statlander who comes back, which is not me poo-pooing that, but, is that what you want to use that 3-year storyline? Are you going to make Chris Statlander a top 3 woman in the division for the next 2 years? If so, then yes, that's a good idea. But, I think you really got to think about that. And I'm not entirely confident that Tony Khan and company have thoroughly thought out like the importance of this and giving it to the right person. I don't want it to be a Brock Lesnar situation in the Undertaker streak. So, my negative equivalent to that would be if Britt Baker comes in and wrestles Jade in Double or Nothing and gives her first loss. I don't think Britt needs that. So, better to give the shine to somebody that you're building up. And, that is, I don't know if you wanted to give it to, I don't know, anyone. I'm open to anything, but I think after tonight, after she wins, then that's really on the table for either Revolution or for Double or Nothing. But I think the record versus the record is going to be a way to sell pay-per-view matches going forward. So I don't know if they pull the trigger on Revolution on ending it, but I think they go a couple. So we'll see. But yeah. I think, this match will be a Jade and Red Velvet match, but it's more about the story. And as Tracy said here, with the other baddies, which is Layla Gray, I think is her name. Will she come in and interfere to help Jade win? I certainly think so, because then you could have her feud with Red Velvet and tell that story ongoing from there. But, we will see. Yeah. And as Brian, hello, Brian. Good to see you. Mercedes comes into Revolution, Mercedes and her. That's not. I don't know if that's the story I would tell with Mercedes, but it's more for what Zach is talking about here, which I think is more what you were talking about, Brian, too. But the OGs versus the outsiders, and with Mercedes side with them and Jade, that's a better way to tell that Jade and Mercedes story in a blood and guts match between the outsiders and the OGs or whatever. So, there's a lot of traction on the OGs versus the outsiders here on the chat about that. So, whether you're into that tremendously or not, just think about that. That's like been the biggest thing on the chat so far. And I talked about Mox and Hangman before everybody jumped on mainly, but I think that's very interesting that Jade, OGs, outsiders, that's like feels pretty on a curve for the AEW women's division. I think it feels like it's in a pretty good place from a potential storyline wise. So, and Bryant, yes, I know you're a big fan of the quarter hour bombs for Jade's match. So I'll pop that up here, but, and you're not incorrect on how that's been the last couple of shows. So I will be looking at that just like you will tomorrow. And if it does bomb, I'm sure we'll talk about it on Fireside Chat, which is my imaging below for some reason. So yes. So, and then we also have an ad for the Acclaimed in action. So, is that the Acclaimed coming out, doing a rap for the live crowd, beating, Fuego and Luther, and then the Gun Club come out and they continue telling that story, and that's the Revolution match, or that sets up that match next week. We'll see. I certainly don't think Gun Club and Acclaimed feels like a pay-per-view worthy match. It feels like if you did a ranking of all the tag team championship matches that pay-per-views would easily be the last place booking, but we'll see how that goes. But I think that's obviously the story being told there as well. All right, let's get to the main event, and then we'll do the fun little thought exercise after that. But we've got Darby Allin, the current TNT champion, taking out Samoa, the current ROH TV champion and former TNT champion. So in the main event, we've had, this is one, and you don't get these very often on Dynamite, where you feels like a pretty straight up 60-40, 55-45 thing. I'm curious what you guys think, who you have as a winner. It will not, I'll keep the same opinion I have at this moment. I'm just curious what you guys think. But, it feels like a true main event for a title that is, I think whether it was Wardlow's issue as a character or not, but was not defended very much once Wardlow had it. Samoa Joe had a good couple of matches, main evented a lot, but it felt still like not as prescient of a title as it does currently under with Darby. And I think Darby being a former champion, being just a popular guy with the AEW crowd, it feels not exactly like a Cody second or third run, whenever that was, where he did a bunch of open when Eddie Kingston, Ricky Starks came in and challenged him, all that stuff. That's probably been the best run of the U.S. title off the top of my head. I'm open to that being debunked here, but feels like that sort of level. And I would, for that reason, don't think that Darby's going to lose here. And I think that you guys, Darby Allin's been booked like Bret Hart. Yeah, that is, so maybe we get a screw job here in the Dayton screw job. But Brian's got an interesting idea, saying Darby wins with an assist from Wardlow. That would make sense. I know it was reported Wardlow was out injured, but it wasn't super long period of time. That could set up. And if anyone has the next ROH show, let me know. I think it's after Revolution, and later in March. Oh yeah, it's the Friday before WrestleMania. Yeah. So Wardlow and Joe for that would feel like a big match. Especially, you got to build something for Claudio. So that would feel like a way to sell some tickets for a big match. And setting that up here would be smart. So that is certainly on the table. But, Darby also just winning, makes sense to me here too. And I think it's just more compelling for him, his character, him and Sting. Obviously now the thing of Sting retiring at the end of the year, there seems to be a story there. Darby being important and didn't have to be champion the entire time, but being a pretty relevant character on the show until that point makes a lot of sense. And another, we got all the big guys here, but Hobbs beating up Darby after makes sense too. Taking out Sting and Darby, I would think. So, yeah, you guys got it. But I think we all seem to be on the Darby side of this. But, if Joe walked out as champion tonight, I wouldn't be surprised either. So I think it's truly a 60-40 Darby, Samoa Joe choice here. So, but yeah, I mean, the whole card is stacked, as many have said in the comments here. Especially compared to last week, not that I FOMO, I could have driven the hour and a half to get there, but I'll be excited to watch it from my couch and not have to make that drive home. So excited for everyone in Dayton that gets to watch the show. Where it is, as someone who's been at that venue in the past, is about the worst place ever to get in and out of. So let's hope Bryant, the Darby, doesn't do that, but I think it's, he's got a higher risk for injury than most wrestlers, unfortunately. So, so let's do the fun little thought exercise at the end of the title here. So if AEW had a Royal Rumble, let's say they totally stole the gimmick, and like this episode of Dynamite was literally the main event, for an hour and 15 minutes was a men's or women's, depending on your choice. I think obviously the roster is smaller from the women's side. It'd be quite the stretch to pull a 30-woman Rumble at the moment. So let's say they had a men's Rumble tonight, and the winner got to face the champion at Double or Nothing. Who would you have in that spot? Because, obviously we haven't been thinking about it for months on end. There's no betting odds. The company's not structured that way, but, it then puts you in a space of booking where MJ is probably the champion, a 99% chance that he's champion at Double or Nothing, assuming he doesn't get injured in the in-between. And, so then you would put over a babyface, right? And, in my mind, I think there's three options, and let me know what you guys think. So Zach's already in here with Jack Perry. I think he would be a dark horse for me, but the way that the company is currently structured and kind of outside of storylines, because obviously you build to this point and you probably wouldn't have like a lot of the storylines that you have going into it. But I think a returning Adam Cole, if he's able to perform in this match, I think he'd be the number one betting odd favorite. And then I think you have a Ricky Starks or a Adam Page, just how much those two are being focused on currently. Starks in the Jericho story, Hangman in the Moxley story, and those are all baby faces to face your heel champion that you want to only throw super hot baby faces against to make sure you retain that. And Jack Perry for me would probably be the fourth person on that list. If there's anyone else I'm missing that would return and be a big surprise and be a baby face no matter what, if Kenny wasn't a trios champion, he'd probably be, fifth. There's a Claudio option too. I mean, him being the Ring of Honor champion, I think throws things off a little bit from a booking standpoint. But depends how you look at it, right? If you just had the the first AEW Royal Rumble, and you wanted that to be someone of note, unlike the WWE's first one, it's just interesting to think that through. And I think not the negative of the Rumble and that gimmick, that style of match, but no matter the company, no matter the point in time, a reasonable person can pick the top three most likely people pretty quickly once you give them that thought exercise of, hey, this person's probably going to be your champion, so you need the opposite, the dark side or the light side, depending who the champion is. So who you putting over? Here's your top three guys in that division. So it's a good way to think about, like, who are those top people in that spot in the company at any given time. So that's where I am. But if you guys have any more thoughts, Tracy, he's coming back. Man, I like, whether I think everybody's pretty much on the, right. They're always talking about my hair. I am, by the way. We're going to eat French fries off of an asteroid together as reference to the comment here. But where was it go? Oh yeah, Punk. No matter what side you're on, I think everyone's kind of on the, like, I'm over the story, and I think everyone was childish in their own way. It's kind of where most reasonable people are on this. So I just want to see CM Punk come back for the sole reason of I want to see how that crowd reacts, right? Because it seems impossible that the crowd would not pop for a huge surprise like that. And then where does it go? Where does it go from there? But also, is the crowd, any AEW crowd, smart enough everywhere to know, like, to majority be not on his side, I guess. I don't know. I mean, we'll see if it happens, but if you had a Rumble type thing and Punk could come back and he won it, I think he'd certainly be a heel if he threw out, an Adam Cole and Ricky Starks and a Adam Page, and then it'd be a good way to book it. But very interesting. The moral of the story is the Royal Rumble is a great gimmick. It works every year, almost no matter what the story is. And, you can get good and bad things out of it. But so I just want to give them that gimmick some credit here on the AEW preview show. So, all right, well, that'll do it. Enjoy the show, everybody. I think it'll be great. And please check. Zach, how did I know you'd figure out you'd fit on that side? Yeah, and this Brian. Sorry, I was ending the show, but you guys have good comments. Yeah, it seems more likely than not that Punk is back at some point. I think so too. Might be a discussion for tomorrow with Zach and I. I wonder if he thinks the same. But please check us out tomorrow, 4:00 Eastern time, here on the Torch YouTube page. Zach Hadorn and I will be discussing the Royal Rumble. I think he liked it more than I did. Surprise, surprise. And what happens tonight on Dynamite and any other news that might come up at any point. So please check us out there. Thank you for joining me as always. And enjoy the wrestling tonight. And everybody have